thank you very much for inviting me and for letting me chat about CaSDaR. So just to sort of give a brief overview of the presentation, so I'm going to tell you a bit about me and kind of how I ended up here. And then I want to talk a bit about the broader landscape of research technical professionals as a whole, and then kind of focus down in on data stewardship, discuss its sort of importance as a role, a bit about the current status of data stewardship in the UK, and then I'm going to introduce CaSDaR and tell you all about our plans for the next 4 years and how you can get involved with us. So first, a bit of background about me. So I'm a Principal Enterprise Fellow at the University of Southampton. I kind of wear quite a few different hats for my job. So the main two being I'm the co-investigator and Pathfinder lead on process recording for the physical sciences data infrastructure, and also the principal investigator for CaSDaR, which is obviously the Careers and Skills for Data-Driven Research Network, which is what I'm here to talk about today. So I'm actually a computer scientist by background. So I did my undergrad at Southampton, did a brief stint in industry, but realised that the corporate world, and to be honest, just pure coding wasn't really for me. And I went back to do a web science PhD. And I kind of wanted to mention web science because it's a really cool interplay between computer science and sociology, and it looks at the importance of the human element in technology and sort of views technology such as the web as socio-technical concepts where the human intervention and sort of usage of the technology is just as, if not more important than the kind of tech itself. And I mention this because I've been involved in the sort of, I guess, data sphere, process recording, looking at how people manage their data for a very, very long time now. And, you know, kind of everything I've sort of noticed is that actually humans are really, really important here. This isn't just something we can do with technology, and kind of a key motivation around CaSDaR is to kind of highlight the importance of this human input to all of our technical and our data endeavours. Especially, I think this is really important in today's society where there is always seemingly a bit of temptation to, you know, we can replace human efforts with AI, everything can be fixed with AI and we don't need people. And I really, really don't think that's true. And I certainly don't think that's true for, you know, data stewards. We, the human beings, are what's really, really important. So before we talk about CaSDaR and kind of data stewards, I wanted to just talk a bit about RTPs, research technical professionals, as a broader concept. So obviously Shania mentioned that we are funded through one of the UKRI RTP calls, but over the last years, the UKRI has put out quite a few different calls and funded a lot of different projects to support the training and skills and career development of RTPs. And as much as CaSDaR specifically is obviously focused towards data stewards, I do think it's really important that we kind of think about the whole landscape of research technical professionals, especially as there's generally a bit of overlap between some of the positions, and ultimately CaSDaR is also really committed to pushing for recognitions of, you know, all of these different types of positions. So I recently joined the University of Southampton's Research Technical Professional Working Group, and we've been having discussions with quite a lot of the other sort of RTP networks, and I've been talking to the different sort of types of RTP roles within universities. And I guess we've been sort of talking about, you know, what makes a research technical professional? You know, what are the key characteristics that underpin them? Because, you know, there's a lot of different types of RTPs and they're kind of growing every day. We've got the sort of well-known research software engineer, which I think is probably the most established, most well-known across different universities. There's also obviously data stewards, but, you know, there's technicians, data scientists, data engineers, infrastructure engineers, and sort of new positions are coming up constantly. But and there's also a lot of different potential titles for these roles that are kind of currently emerging. But even if some of these are a bit more sort of established and recognised than others, one of the key things that I think really makes an RTP is having a specialist skill set that actually enables the research that they're involved in to be produced at a high level and actually facilitates and supports those high quality research outputs. So whether that's actually coming in to write high quality software that people in the project don't have the skills to do, or, you know, doing complex data analysis, or actually showing people how to properly manage their research data throughout the project, you know, to ensure it adheres to FAIR principles, and the data that's created is actually worth sharing. There's a lot of these different things that we actually really desperately need in our research projects alongside the domain knowledge to push things forward. And I think it's really important that we recognise how specialist these skills are. And we understand that these aren't ever skills that we should expect the researchers to all have themselves. And ultimately, these things are progressing to be recognised and kind of as evidenced by existence of us, the network, and the well-established Society for Research Software Engineers, and initiatives like the Technician Commitment. These are coming more into the fore, but unfortunately, I think there are still quite a lot of challenges that face both data stewards, but also RTPs as a whole. So one of these challenges is obviously sort of still there's quite a lot of lack of recognition across different institutions for some of those lesser known types of roles. And there's also the fact that quite a lot of people might do these roles, particularly the less well recognized ones like data stewardship, without necessarily even realizing that that's the role they're doing or being credited with the importance of this work. But there's also another really big problem around lack of obvious career paths and lack of career progression across different institutions. So, there are really good universities like UCL that are like absolutely leading the way in RTPs, and they have a formally established career path, and they've identified quite a lot of different types of research technical professional roles. But a lot of universities still don't properly have this concept, or at least even if they understand that RTPs exist, they don't have that formal career path. And unfortunately, a lot of these roles then end up on career tracks where they don't have the sort of natural progression that maybe, I guess, research fellows or the more typical postdoctoral roles have. Even though they are just as important to supporting all of this research. So that is a problem. But I mean, I will say the good news is, as I mentioned, there's now a lot of projects. UKRI are pumping a lot of money and a lot of time into actually funding different projects that are dedicated to supporting RTPs and addressing these challenges. So I just kind of wanted to set a bit of a wider sphere for this before we talked about data stewardship. But obviously, the key role that CaSDaR is focusing on is data stewardship. So I think there's a lot of different sort of quite similar definitions for data stewardship, but one of my favorites is, data stewardship involves managing the data of an organization or project, ensuring its quality, accessibility, and usability. And data stewardship is really, really important to ensure that we produce high quality research. And it is needed across, as I'm trying to evidence by this diagram stolen from the GIST research data lifecycle, it's really needed across this entire research data lifecycle. So all the way from that planning stage to actually help researchers write their data management plans, help work on actual sensible data collection and capture processes to ensure this is done well at the beginning. Because remember, there's only so much you can clean and fix poor, inconsistent, incomplete data sets. If you don't get these things right at the beginning, then you've kind of made a rod for your own back, really, and there's only so much you can do retrospectively. You need to ensure ethical and responsible research approaches. That's really, really important, and actually be able to advise on things around when ethics applications are needed. I certainly know there's quite a disparity across our departments at the university of understanding of when ethics is needed or how to actually consider some of those ethical and sort of privacy and data considerations around the research that they're doing. Data stewards can also help with the actual sharing of the data, so identifying relevant repositories to put it in, how to actually package it up in a useful, reusable manner, and ensure that your data is suitably documented, described, and appropriately licensed for reuse. Now, obviously, I'm at RDM Club, so I would be preaching to the converted if I went off on another rant about how it is absolutely ludicrous to expect every researcher to have all of these skills. So I'm not going to, but I think hopefully we can all be in agreement that this is a lot of specialist skills, even for one person to have. So we shouldn't be expecting our researchers to have all of these skills. So in terms of data stewards, again, thankfully, data stewards are slowly starting to become established. So both in terms of their place within that sort of wider research technical professional landscape, and there's been a lot of talk more recently, I hear a lot about DRTPs, so digital research technical professionals. And I think people are starting to recognise that this role exists and it's really important. However, again, much like kind of the wider RTP roles, this still isn't commonly recognised across all institutions. And I would say both in academia and industry. I mean, I actually presented about data stewardship to an industrial lab conference earlier this year. And it was quite funny because someone put up their hand and said, well, we have a data steward. And I don't think they do any of the things that you mentioned, which did lead me to think, well, I'm not quite sure what they're doing under that bracket, but fair enough. But I mean, again, there's people sort of normally under titles of data stewardship that certainly aren't doing maybe what other people would expect. There's definitely people doing work that is classed under data stewardship, but a lot of them aren't being recognised for this. So quite a lot of them sit in libraries, or they work in research data management or data curation, or even in a way they kind of end up more like me, so they haven't kind of come through that traditional route, but actually they end up really interested in data and really interested in making sure the data's done well. So you end up doing this work for a project because you've kind of gained those skills over time and you're invested in making sure that your data management's done properly. But this is still ultimately quite fragmented across different institutions, and there aren't obvious career paths for a lot of data stewards. So and we are woefully skilled, we are woefully lacking in skilled data stewards, which is another big challenge. So this is where CaSDaR comes in. So as Shania mentioned, we are funded by the UKRI Digital Research Technical Professional Call. So it's a 4-year Network Plus project. It's led out of the University of Southampton, and we're going to be running all the way up until the end of March 2029, which is a little bit terrifying because that's right before I turn 39. So I try not to think too much about the end date of this network. But there we go. So this is the rest of our team. So we have 4 interdisciplinary co-Is. So I'm sure some of you will recognise these people. They're a lot more famous than I am, but Simon Coles from chemistry and PSDI. We've got Simon Hetrick from computer science, who's really heavily involved in promoting research software engineers. So if anyone's kind of more in the RSE sphere, you've probably seen a lot of Simon. We've got James Baker from the humanities, who's also involved in the Riches project, and we've got Isabel Stark, who is actually our head of research data management at Southampton, and therefore has kind of oversight of all of the different challenges of RDM across the university. We also have the fabulous Louise Saul, who is our coordinator. So some of you may recognise her from her work for the UK Reproducibility Network. So we've got quite a nice mix of people here because, CaSDaR is completely domain agnostic. I really want to mention, we are tending towards trying to make sure we support the underrepresented disciplines, but we are a network for anyone and everyone who is interested in data stewardship and kind of, again, that sort of wider RTP role. We're also very, very lucky to have some lovely project partners. So as Jenny mentioned, ELIXIR-UK is one of our project partners. We've also got representatives from the UK Reproducibility Network, PSDI and the Digital Curation Centre, and representatives from all of those institutions and projects sit on our management board. And we've also got listed sort of below a really nice multidisciplinary advisory board as well. So really trying to make sure that we have people to cover as many different kind of domains and different knowledge areas around data stewardship as possible. So this is our roadmap for the next 4 years. We've kind of got the key 5 things that we want to achieve. So obviously number 1 is we really want to build a community of data stewards. So there are a lot of international communities for data stewards, but we don't feel like there's a full sort of UK-based hub for data stewards, and many are siloed without support, and we want to provide a place for them to get together, share knowledge. I'm going to come together to drive us forward, and we're really keen to formally establish this role of data stewards. We want to understand the differences and commonalities and challenges across different domains and institutions. We have a lot of knowledge in our team, but we would certainly, Bruno, we assume that we know everything. So we are kind of adopting a learn by doing approach. So we're going to be funding data stewards in different roles at different levels across different institutions and different domains, so that we can gain a better understanding of, not only these challenges and commonalities, but also where people sort of feel and see that they need data stewardship and kind of the differences that having data stewards in those projects can make. I've already mentioned, but I'm really, really passionate about those career pathways for data stewards. This is a really, really important career and job for people, and if we're actually going to bring people in and excel our research, then we need people to want to come and do this job and to actually have a viable progression through it, and not just kind of see it as something, well, I do like it, but where am I going to be able to go from here? And we want to produce a sort of career pathway with entry level routes and, very importantly, paths for progression. And we also really want to foster a culture change where data stewards actually appropriately recognised for this role and contributions, and projects are calling out for data stewards rather than just saying, oh, it's fine, we'll get the researchers to do it. And we also think this is really important. So this isn't a project we want to just see die at 4 years. We really want to be sustainable. So we are trying to put mechanisms in place to ensure that the project can actually continue sort of past that initial 4-year grant period. And these are our 6 key deliverables. So again, in line with our career pathways work, we want to establish a high-level institutional framework demonstrating the different roles and responsibilities of different data stewards, and also understand sort of where this sits in the overall RTP pathways, because our university and quite a few other universities and the other networks, some of the other networks dedicated to RTPs, are looking at the wider RTP career pathways. So we want to have this data stewardship framework, but also see where it sort of sits in that wider bracket. And also to understand where those sort of overlaps are between job roles, because ultimately I think people could come in and do potentially quite a few different RTP roles depending on their skill set. So it's also quite important for people to understand where they could go with that. We want to also create a resource repository with examples of different types of data stewardship roles at different levels that people can then reuse, and also to understand sort of where they sit within some of those different specialisms as well, both sort of domain and sort of more data specialisms. And we also want to understand what the skills gaps are across the UK and sort of what training isn't available. So I've never seen the point in reinventing the wheel. There are lots of excellent people working on things in this area, working on training, working on curriculum, working on all these things. So there's no point us redoing that. We want to understand where are people sort of missing training, what needs to exist that doesn't exist, and then we can kind of devote our efforts in the most useful way and understand where data stewards need that upskilling the most. And also, I guess we're nothing if not self-reflective, so we really want to make sure that we are making an impact with CaSDaR's work. So we'll be conducting a formal analysis to help us understand this, which we're going to be running as part of our flexible fund. And then a big part of our flexible fund will be granting funding awards to support these different data steward positions that I mentioned. And again, we're also going to use some of that to create a data stewardship association and then elect a committee that we can slowly devolve responsibility over to them over the years to try and again have that sort of sustainable model to move past us. We are planning an extensive event programme. So we are very excited. We're going to be launching CaSDaR formally on the 18th of September. So a bit more about that at the end. We're planning to run some large-scale data steward conferences. So I think right now there are some really good events that draw a lot of data stewards, such as the Step Up conference I attended earlier this year and the International Digital Curation Conference. But I haven't seen anything just like fully for data stewards. So we really want to provide that place for our community to convene together. So we'll be running one next year. We're going to be running workshops for knowledge sharing, also training style workshops, and also hackathons and datathons, because I think you learn so much more about actually playing with data and working with data if you actually do it yourself. A lot of our events, where possible, we're going to be doing hybrid events. So our launch is a big hybrid event. We'll also be doing some purely virtual events as well, because as much as this is, it's a UK funded network, but really we do want to make sure we can collaborate as widely as possible. And also even with the scope of the UK, things are far apart from each other. People can't always make physical meetings. So we do really want to make these things as inclusive as possible. And then just to say, if you want to see our upcoming events, so at the moment we do just have the launch, but if you go to casdar.ac.uk/events, we will be listing all of our future event plans there. But kind of talking about the inclusivity aspect, oh no, that is not the right slide, never mind. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the funding calls, although don't want to spoil too much for the launch. But we are going to be running funding calls. So the first of which we're going to launch, we're going to tell you about at the launch, and then there'll be a formal webinar to open it up later this year. We're going to be supporting data stewardships and projects at 2 different levels. So there's going to be kind of a smaller fixed amount available for people who want to run internships. There are institutions that require data stewardship, and these internship opportunities will come with some training as well. So a chance for those interns to also get upskilled in those areas. There'll also be an option to bid for larger scale projects that demonstrate the value of embedding data stewardship practices in a process, project, or collection. So I'm not going to say any more at this point, because if you want to find out more details, you'll have to come to our launch and find out about them. And then I also, did just kind of want to talk a bit about values and commitments, having mentioned inclusivity. So I've mentioned, the recognition and the sustainability aspects, but inclusivity is really, really important to us. We want to embed EDI across all of our activities and ultimately be as supportive and inclusive as possible. So we really want as many people to be able to engage with us as possible. Lots of our events will be hybrid. There'll be some stuff that's purely online. We're putting effort into making sure we find accessible venues for people that want to attend in person, because it's wild how inaccessible some venues are that only seem to have stairs and no accounts for anything else. Having run enough events in my time, we've now got a nice platform of what to look for. There will also be a bursary fund in place for event attendance. So this doesn't just include money for travel, but kind of you can basically put the financial support that you need. So if you need support in another way, so help with, I guess, money to help with caring responsibilities or other things, we're basically here to help and try and enable you to attend our events. So I've put a link at the bottom on the left-hand side, the CaSDaR bursaries on our website. We've kind of got a rolling, ongoing form, and then you can use that to apply to any of our meetings, and we'll review these for each upcoming event. So I will say there's still some bursaries left for the launch. So if you were on the fence about coming to the launch but weren't sure if you could afford the travel or accommodation, there's still some days left to apply for that. So do go and have a look on our website. We're also really committed to promoting responsible research practices, because that's, again, very, very important from a data stewardship perspective. So we want to ensure that our work and research is actually ethical. So obviously where we plan on using data and where we plan on conducting research, we'll obviously be applying for ethics. I actually sit on our ethics committee, so I'll be having kind of oversight of all of that, but also making sure that the data stewards we interact with and the ones that sort of come on and we train and we upskill, that we're instilling these responsible and ethical practices in them as well. And we also want to make sure we're just collaborating and sharing knowledge wherever we can, and promoting these practices across the network. And then this is, sorry, a big slide, but I will be sharing the slides. But it's just to say, we're not the only people doing this. So there's a lot of other national and international initiatives working on data stewardship and kind of those wider different RTP roles. So actually right at the bottom, because I couldn't fit all of these on one slide and it all just fell a bit mad, is the UK funded projects for research technical professionals. It's kind of the 11 different projects that started sort of up, I think it was last year. And then sort of the rest of these are kind of more specific data stewardship projects. And then finally to say, as I said, we are launching on the 18th of September. So it's a hybrid event. The physical component will take place at Birmingham Library, and then the virtual part will take place on Zoom. Also, just as a nod, so I mentioned I'm a co-I for the Physical Sciences Data Infrastructure, where their showcase is the day before on the 17th. So if you're kind of coming in at the physical sciences area of interested in data, this could be a good 2-for-1 event for you, because this also takes place at Birmingham Library. So our event's going to host stories from different data stewards and sort of people working in data stewardship at different levels across different institutions. There's going to be an opportunity to hear about related data stewardship initiatives in the UK, and also sort of looking forward to Europe and beyond, and also an opportunity to hear about what our partners are doing in this area. So we've got a lovely panel with representatives from all of our different project partners. There's going to be opportunities for sort of community discussion and input. So we are going to be asking people a bunch of questions sort of feed into sort of, how can we best support you in terms of an online community? What do you think our priorities would be? What do you want to see from the network? So there'll be lots of opportunities to kind of also feed back to us, because ultimately, we are a network for the community. We want to we want to serve you guys. And yeah, there will also be the sort of more detail about our funding call and the opportunity to ask questions and find out more about that. And then also get a lay of the land of all of the dates and when we'll be sort of formally launching that. And who knows, you might actually bump into somebody that you actually want to put together a funding call with. So it's always nice to do the networking as well. And then just kind of to say, these are all of our details. So if you're interested in CaSDaR, please sign up to our mailing list and follow us on social media to get all of the latest updates on our activities. And also, most importantly, if you are still on the fence about signing up to our mailing list or signing up to our launch, we're going to be unveiling our new mascot, which is obviously clearly the most important part of any network. She's very cute, she's very fluffy, and she has a tail. So for anyone who's vaguely encountered me or my coordinator, you may have a vague idea of what animal we'll have picked. But she is going to be awesome, so you definitely want to come and meet her.